Hi everybody, today's Kit Critical is going to be focused on talking about slinging your thing, and what that means is putting a sling on your rifle, what to use, how to mount it, and all that great stuff. Now before we get into the different types of slings and how to use them, why would you want a sling for your rifle? Now some people don't run slings and that's totally up to you. However, I always recommend slinging your rifle for a few reasons. They're expensive, you don't want to drop them on the floor in case something happens, you take a trip and your rifle goes flying or somebody bumps into you. Just not a good idea to have these land on the floor and break, especially at Siege, where the floor is made of solid kryptonite, is not great. Some people argue that running no slings is faster, I can transition faster, I can move my gun around faster, and that's all fine and dandy. However, to me, not being able to use your sling quickly is more of a training issue and a dry fire issue, not so much of a no sling makes me faster issue. Yes, that's true, but you can just train around it personally. So I think you can get really quick with a sling, and I've seen people get super quick with a sling without sacrificing the ability to retain their primary to their body. Another reason why you might want to run a sling is for games with objectives, games with medic rules, something where you have to do something with your hands that isn't just shooting. In my kind of way of thinking, and in my mind, if something in the game is so important at Airsoft, more important than shooting the enemy players and stuff like that, or the opposing team, and I got to put my rifle down, I'd rather have my rifle on me than on the ground where somebody can kick it, take it of course, you shouldn't be doing that, but it's not on my body, and that's really inefficient. If I can just put my rifle to the side, put it down, medic someone, pick up an objective, take the flag or whatever, to me, that's way better than having to drop it on the floor or doing some weird one-handed mojo with it. So the last point I want to make, and something that most people don't think about, is slings can accommodate for better and more stable shooting. That's something that we're going to go over in the range later in the video. There are two basic types of slings out there. There's lots of different kinds, lots of different brands. A 1-point sling and a 2-point sling. There's also a 3-point sling. We're not going to go over into that unless you're running an MP5 or some sort of old school loadout. A 1-point sling denotes that the sling attaches onto one point of the gun. Usually it's around where the buffer tube is on an M4 or somewhere where the receiver and the stock meet on most guns. A 2-point sling means it attaches, you guessed it, on 2 points of the gun. So like this AK has a 2-point sling over here, this point is attached to the rail, and this point is attached to the rear of the stock. Now why would you choose one over the other? The 1-point sling has advantages and disadvantages, as does the 2-point sling. For smaller guns, and especially inside a CQB environment like Siege, and if you're not really sure how to maneuver with your kit, I would recommend a 1-point sling. The main advantages with the 1-point sling is that it's super fast. So you only have one little attachment of your gun to your body. It's super easy, transitioning shoulders, really great, super fast to use, and it does the job of keeping the gun to your body. However, the job of keeping your gun to your body isn't done as well as something like a 2-point, which retains it closer and also retains the front of the gun. For 1-point sling, it's kind of like a big pendulum on a grandfather clock or something like that, where you have this big mass of gun either beside you, in front of you, or wherever you decide to sling your rifle. Now, some great examples of 1-point slings that people can use are going to be something like your Magpul style kind of sling. We're going to go over the more specific examples of these later. Now, if you're not really looking to put your rifle down, you're not looking to use your sling to accommodate different shooting positions, a 1-point sling is probably the best choice and what I'd recommend for most new players. For me, I do like playing in varied environments, and I feel like the 2-point sling gives me more options, so that's generally what I go with. Now, the 2-point sling won't be as fast as the 1-point sling. You're going to have to learn to do what we call swimming in and out of your sling. So most of the time, I run this sling just on my neck, and if I need to retain my gun, or if I'm doing just only on-hand shooting, for example, in the forest outdoors, where I don't really feel like ambidextrous shooting is super important, I will loop it around my body. There's also a ton of good examples of 2-point slings out there, and one example of a good 2-point sling is actually going to be the Magpul again. The Magpul sling is pretty cool because it actually can convert from a 1 to 2-point sling via this loop over here. So you just pull that off, and now you have a 2-point sling with 2 attachment points, and you can clip that on, and you have a 1-point sling. My sling of choice, however, as with a lot of the cool Geardo Instagram world, is going to be the Faro Concept Slingster. And I absolutely love this sling. One thing that you'll find about a lot of good 2-point slings is they have a pad. And 2-point slings are going to be really good for if using a heavier gun like an AK or maybe a more tricked out M4, then you need to carry that weight with, because this will help you distribute the weight along your body so your arms aren't getting super fatigued if you're holding the gun for long positions of time, and they're also able to strap it and have that weight distribute properly. Pads are also great because they are wider. They kind of prevent the sling from rolling around on your kit, so they're really nice. If you're running a 2-point sling, I generally recommend getting one with a pad. So once you decide what sling you want to get, whether it's a 1 or 2, you're probably going to want to look at attachment types. And some slings come with this out of the box, and some slings like the Faro do not. There are 3 basic types of attachments. One is going to be hard pointing or looping your sling on to the gun manually, like I like to do in the back of my gun here, where it's just looped on with no attachment points to one of the sling loops, either on a stock, the buffer tube, stuff like that. The second way is going to be via some sort of clip. So I have some examples here. A clip, this is a Magpul clip. And over here I have the BFG U-loop, which is pretty interesting. It's like a cable clip that clips around the rail segment. And the third attachment, and a very popular one, is going to be quick detaches, also known as QDs. So these little guys go into these little sockets here, and they kind of attach via Balti, tents, and stuff like that, so you can't pull it out. And the nice thing about these guys is they're super easy to quick detach, as the name goes. Now for a newer player, most guns come with some sort of loop or some sort of, thing that you can clip your gun on. For that, I generally recommend a clip, like a Magpul clip, an HK clip, or a BFG U-loop. They also tend to, what I find, be a bit more secure, especially for airsoft styles of guns. Airsoft style QDs, they might not fit. There could be QC issues and stuff like that. They might fall out. I've seen that happen before. Not great to have your sling on and then you're going to fall out. For clips, not as much to fail. It usually loops around something. So even if like the spring were to fail, there's usually a lock or there's other ways to attach your guns on. Now, quick word of advice for those of you who have those really tiny little sling clips or sling mount points on your gun, and you can't get something like a big Magpul clip through or an HK clip through. There's two ways you can fix that. One way, and my less preferred way, is to get a split ring from a keychain and putting that on and then clipping your thing to that split ring. That works well. However, getting the split ring on can be kind of annoying and it's not the cleanest solution. My personal clean solution for that actually is getting a piece of 550 paracord, and if that's too thick, you can take the inside kind of little strands out, tying that on, making a really good knot, burning it, and using that as a sling loop. That's what I recommend. I ran that on my AK for years. Works perfectly fine. Hard pointing slings to your gun can also be really great, especially if you don't plan to take the sling off. Like I never really plan to take my sling off personally, so I just attach my rear point here. The reason I also like to attach my sling point here and have it kind of hard pointed or looped into the gun itself is so that it doesn't twist. So for these, they have like a degree of twist to them. For QDs, that could be even worse if you don't have like an anti-rotation QD. For this doesn't really twist. It doesn't really go anywhere. It kind of just goes in one direction. You put the One Direction band on it. It kind of just goes in one direction and it works really well. I never really take the slings off my gun personally, so I find that that works well. I don't really like to loop it in the front, however, because there generally isn't really space to do that. I like to have a clip here and a hard point in the back. Just my weird way of doing things, works well for me. Now for QDs, I recommend if you're using QDs to always try to get a real QD if you can, just because airsoft QDs, they can have these loose springs over here, and if they get bumped, they can fall out, or these ball bearings can they're just not properly spec'd and stuff like that. So you do have to be a little bit more careful with QDs. However, they are super popular. People in the real world often consider them the best attachment point, and you have to make sure that your gun has hardware, of course, to support that. But if you're using QDs, just make sure that it's a good quality one. Give it a few tugs, make sure that you can't bump the switch really easily, and you're generally good to go. Now onto mounting your slings. So when you mount your sling to your gun for a 1 point, there's really only one place or 1 point to do it. Now some people like to mount it in the back of the stock like this and hang it off themselves. That's not too great because you have the whole mass of the gun kind of swinging around like that. It's kind of awkward when you have something here and you have to compress it in your shoulder. Not good. Usually you're going to have a sling mount point somewhere along the receiver and where the stock meets. I generally recommend attaching your 1 point sling there. It's kind of a good center of gravity for your gun. Works well. It's out of the way of your hand when it's tensioned up against your body. For 1 points, keep it as simple as possible. Just use that attachment location. For 2 points, there's a lot of schools of debate on this. Now for me, I like to attach my 2 point slings in a very specific way. I like to do what's called the front to back method. Front to back is kind of weird because it's more of like left to right. But as you can see with this gun over here, I have one sling point on the right and one sling point on the left of me. So the reason I like this is because when you're transitioning shoulders, having your rear sling point on the opposite side, it kind of doesn't get bunched up like if it were on this side when you're putting in your shoulder. And it doesn't really choke you as much when you transition shoulders because it's on this side, it kind of swings over much more smoothly. So I like to have it on the rear and kind of on the opposite side of where this one is. So if you're a lefty, you want to put it on this side. If you're a righty, you want to put it on this side. Now I like having my sling all the way at the back over here because I feel like it controls the stock really well and it doesn't get in the way of my shoulder when I'm shooting. For a 2 point sling, because you're bringing the gun up, sometimes I found if I attached it here, when I bring the gun up to my shoulder to shoot, the sling can get bunched up here. It's really annoying, so I just have it in the back there. Now for the front. Some people like to have their sling point all the way up here, and that's really great, especially if you're doing a lot of patrol stuff, if you're doing more mil-simi stuff where you're not shooting too much, you need to walk around with the gun a lot because the sling does carry the weight of the gun up there. However, I kind of like to look for that little balance of mil and speed, so I put my sling pretty much where the rail kind of starts from the receiver, so my hands are free here, and that way it doesn't really get in the way. I don't have to go over and under it when I'm doing stuff. The problem with that, I guess, is sometimes it can get in the way of the mag well. However, I've never really found that to be an issue, so that's just how I do it. With 2-point slings, you do have a lot more options in how you like to mount them, but that's what I like to do. TLDR, back to front, and then I like to have it in the rear over here, and then somewhere in the front near where the receiver meets the rail. Now we're gonna go into the range and we're gonna join Aaron out there, and we're gonna go over how to set up the sling to your body, some shooting techniques with it, how to use it and practice with it, and what we like to use our slings for. So, let's go. All right guys, so we're out at the range for our sling video today. With me is Aaron, the GM of Siege Airsoft. We're gonna kind of be discussing how we like to set up our slings, what we like to use and all that stuff. So Aaron, you have your custom off-white Magpul style sling over there. For those of you asking, not for sale, that's pretty exclusive. Yet, at least, I don't know, we'll see. Anyways, Aaron, how do you like to set up your sling if you're using it as like a 1-point? Because I think a lot of our viewers use a 1-point sling. I just want to go over that.
You know what, I like to make sure it's kind of going around like my left shoulder, so that when I ditch my gun, especially if it's a white 1-point, it's not going over my holster. That's like the main thing for me. It's not going on that side. Other than that, it doesn't drop too far down, and it's not something that like as I'm switching shoulders left and right, it really gets in the way. Because like 1-point, you really want to be capitalizing on this, being able to switch like
stuff.
this.
Yeah.
So generally around there.
Yeah. So what's the so when you do that, you kind of set it up so it's on your left shoulder, not your right. It's your off shoulder.
Yeah, exactly. On my off shoulder, because like
makes transition.
My pistols are here.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So typically it'll go this way of some sort. Then I can access my pistol.
So I noticed that when you're having your 1-point, your gun actually goes pretty low when it's dropping. Yeah.
It can. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you like to have it there because it's adjustable?
If it's kind of a ditch situation, yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I can't move with it.
Right.
I don't recommend moving with it. That's where like a 2-point situation is good, or there are people who might want something like this, then you can kind of like move around with it more.
So a long foregrip, you can actually kind of use that to position your sling in a way that it kind of sits a little higher. So that way you don't have to play with the adjuster and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So for this, it's kind of just using your long foregrip to kind of index your sling and almost have like a weird kind of 3-point situation going on where it's sitting close to your body and you need to do something with it. So if you need to retain your gun, it's a really quick way to do it, and it kind of takes advantage if you're using a long
handle a prop.
Yeah. So you can't do that with a stub, like a really tiny little stubby thing. You need to have like pretty substantial foregrip for that.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Neat. So your ride height is around there and all that stuff? Yeah. Awesome. So for me, I like to use a 2-point sling, so it's a little bit different. One thing that you'll notice is when you buy your sling, they're gonna generally be super long because they're made for a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. So if it's too long, what you can do is you can kind of bunch it up and tape it, or you can just cut it. Honestly, don't be a weenie with your gear. If you need to cut your sling and it's for you, you don't plan on selling it, just cut it, burn the end, super easy. So that's what I had to do with my ferro sling, is if you can see here, I cut it like that, and I just burned the end with a lighter so it doesn't fray, because it was way too long. It was made for like a giant. So for me, I'm sure you already noticed, I run my sling for my ride height when it's sitting like this. I kind of run the stock right around the nip level. I don't know why I use the nips as a reference point so much. Sorry, but I run around here.
It's a workspace reference.
Yeah. So that way, if I really need to transition, I still can. It's just kind of tight, you know?
Yeah.
So it has enough room, just enough room that I can transition to my offhand when I'm shooting, but enough so I can have it pretty nice and tight here, so I have this supporting the weight of my gun. Another thing is when we talked about it inside there, is like swimming in and out of your sling. So what I kind of do is like a Yahoo truck movement like this. I go out and in like that if I need to swim in and out of my sling. So when I'm doing this is usually when I'm transitioning a lot, where I'm moving around an area where the gun's gonna be moving around a lot. So like in a building, in a tight corridor, stuff like that. So I'll bring my hand out so the sling is just riding around my neck, and I'll often take the adjuster on the ferro and I'll tighten it all the way. So that way it's just around my neck and it's not like too much material. It still retains if I need to drop it. I can still transition to the side, go for pistol if I need to. But is just out of the way and there's not much material hanging out. That way for this, I can really easily transition from left to right, no problem, and it's really quick. So the adjuster, what I see a lot of people do wrong actually, is when they set up their sling, they like set it up to the right length, but they run the adjuster all the way in as their kind of default longest position.
Yep.
And that's not correct. Because when it's like all the way in like this, and it's the default longest position, if you were to bring it out, the gun's gonna be like sitting like way too low. Like if I had it all the way, it would be sitting like this, or even lower, like down like here or something like that. So what you actually wanna do, I find, is that you wanna set your adjuster all the way out, and then you wanna set the gun to a position, because you're not really moving this to the middle that much, it's pretty much just all the way in or out. So when you're doing this, you wanna have your adjuster all the way out, set your sling to where the ride height is. For me, stock, nipple, super easy, or stock like right below the armpit, or another way to do it is to go offhand, and tighten it so it's tight when you go offhand. When you go on hand, it's not too bad. And then, that way when you adjust it tightly, you can still shoot, you can't really transition, but this is what I call using your 2-point sling to stabilize, and this is what we're talking about inside too, is that you can use this more than just to retain your gun, that's the primary purpose, but you can use it to aid shooting as well. So when I'm playing outdoors, when I'm playing a defensive thing, and I don't need to transition my shoulders, I'll often like tighten my sling up all the way, and really get into my gun, and with this amount of tension here, it's like really locking the rifle into my body, so I can hold this out here all day long, put this hand down, and I'm like super, super, super stable, like that. Gun's unloaded, don't worry. So that's what I like to do. Another thing you can do, really quick, is kind of what you do with wrapping the sling around your foregrip. Is I wrap it around my forearm, and I use that to tension the gun. It's a bit of an old hunting trick, but I kind of do this. So normally swim out, so you kind of swim into it again from the bottom, and now it's wrapped around my forearm. And I could bring the gun out like this, and you see the tension there. And I can use this to tension my gun to my body, so have those really stable shots for defending in Berlin, or stuff like that. That's kind of how I like to do. So, like I said, a sling's not just to keep your gun to your body. You can use it for cool things like that, accommodating for a 1-point sling, and you can also use it to accommodate really tight shooting positions where you can get really, really nice and locked up into the gun. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching the Sling Your Thing video with Siege Airsoft. Hope everybody out there can get some practice in and practice some of these techniques in game. Hopefully we helped you out a bit. If you have any suggestions on slings that you like, or how you like to use your sling, please include them down in the comments below. We've got a lot more videos coming for you, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you so much.